So welcome everybody. If you're just joining, the invitation is to enter your name in the chat along with where you're from without using any geopolitical names. No cities, states, countries, provinces, wherever you might be calling in from. So welcome everyone. This is the first session in a series that we're calling Becoming Regenerative. And so essentially what the series is all about is exploring the foundational aspects of what we call regenerative practice. And we're primarily drawing from the lineage of Carol Sanford and Regenesis. So if you're unfamiliar with those folks, you can look that up. So there's a particular kind of school that we're coming from. And along with that, there's a couple things I want to say about how we're going to be working together. And I'm going to start by telling you a little bit of a story. So as some of you folks and me and a lot of my partners in the company I'm a part of worked with Carol Sanford for a number of years. And the first time one of my partners showed up at one of her in-person sessions, they were going around the room, and the question was, "Why are you here?" And John's response, John Becker's my partner, his response was, "I'm here to be a sponge. I'm just here to be a fly on the wall and absorb as much information and knowledge as I can." And Carol just turned to him, and her response was, "That is not in my cosmology." And so the cosmology, part of the cosmology of this school is that in order to really embody and understand and learn something at a deeper level requires your participation. It's the way that we're going to work together in generically we might call working in a developmental way requires your participation. And so if you're here to just listen and observe, that's not what these sessions are generally all about. We're going to put you to work. We're going to have a bunch of breakouts. We're going to engage in conversation. So this isn't like a passive learning, right? It requires active engagement. And so the other thing I want to mention is there are two rules in this school. First one is don't accept anything we say without testing it through your own personal experience. And the second rule is don't reject anything we say without testing it through your own personal experience. And that second one often is harder, right? So along with that, what I'm going to invite you to do also is to treat everything that we're going to be talking about very lightly. Don't feel like you have to get it all at once. That's generally, some people maybe have that ability. I certainly don't. So just treat this lightly. We're trying to embody some of these practices, and it takes time for them to sink in. So I'd encourage folks to be on screen if at all possible. And we are going to put you in a breakout to begin, and Debbie's going to introduce that.
Thanks, Marcus. Yeah, great. Welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here, and we're excited to be kicking off this series and welcoming you into our practice. So I really appreciate you all being here. So we're just going to start out with a breakout. You'll be in groups of 2. It'll just be you and someone else in there because this is going to be a very short breakout of 5 minutes. And there are 2 questions. Well, really, it's 1 question, but we've just framed it 2 different ways. What does the word regenerative mean to you? And how do you regenerate any living being or living system? I will put those in the chat for you so you can see those. So again, very short breakout. This is just to get us energized and start thinking along these lines. What does the word regenerative mean to you? And how do you regenerate any living being or living system? So
Okay,
if you
looks
don't,
like we have 2 rooms of 3, but the rest are 2s.
fantastic. So yeah, Marcus, when you're ready, you can pop folks into those rooms in 5 minutes.
They should be going.
Great. So building on that and thinking about what you were talking about in your breakout rooms, I'd like to invite you now to think about how do you cultivate the conditions for any living system to regenerate life? What's required of us for the development of these conditions? So anyone can unmute and speak into that. How do you cultivate the conditions for any living system to regenerate life?
I would say take away the things that's harming it. If that is the case, that would be one step.
It's a good first step. Yeah.
Stop doing harm.
Mm.
I might go one step back and suggest like it starts with an awareness and recognizing the impact in the first place.
Yeah.
Awareness. Yeah.
How do we cultivate that awareness, do you think, Rebecca?
Yeah, for me, it's always starting with the stakeholders. The people who are in the system and have a stake in the system, who will tend to educate me as to really what the system is beyond what I see from my lens.
Mm.
What if the stakeholders don't have voices? Right? Like plants and birds and rivers. I don't know. Just curious, Josh.
We find advocates for them.
Mhm.
We have to, just as other handicapped people, in our society who don't have voices or economic, reason that they don't have voices.
So I'm compelled to offer that there's a premise in what you're suggesting that they actually don't have voices. And some would say that they do. We've just forgotten how to listen.
I was going to say the willingness to listen in the first place would be a step before that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yeah. What else is required of us, do you think, to cultivate these conditions?
I was talking about change, a willingness to change or challenge existing systems, as Josh alluded to, and the others, is we can't carry on the same way, otherwise we end up in the same place. Therefore, you have to be willing to be different.
I would add on to that commitment to making that change and to continuing or sustaining that change. But that commitment, because I think like other things in life, people can always revert back to old ways. So commitment, I think, is a big part of it as well.
What helps us sustain our commitment, Karen, do you think?
I think seeing value in the environment that we're trying to change, having maybe some in seeing the value. So maybe if you're not directly impacted, but seeing value in it, or if you are directly impacted, having personal investment. I think that would be another thing. Having your own life directly impacted to where you need to promote that regeneration so that you yourself can thrive in a healthy way. So personal investment, but also recognizing value for others and not just for yourself.
I hear a reciprocity in that, right? Value for yourself and for others, there's mutual value there.
I think the consistency of commitment also is fueled by inspiration and knowledge and the interconnectedness that comes through doing things together.
Mhm.
It's very hard to maintain the momentum and the motivation and the focus and the drive when you feel like you're working alone, when you don't have inspiration to draw from, where you don't have examples and case studies and just people doing incredible things that make you realize that anything is possible.
Mm. And alongside that, faith, I would say as well, not necessarily religious, but a belief in what you're doing, steadfast, which is kind of going along with the commitment thing. But I mean, for me, I think I have a quite a spiritual faith in what I'm doing, which is quite intuitive. So it's about listening again, but not to people's voices, to the inner spirit, right? What you feel is right.
I would add as well, is it working out what life and thriving is for everyone or everything involved, because everyone's concept of what a full life or a healthy life is so wildly different. You know, I meet some people that don't know what, you know, what a plant, you know, is sometimes, you know, that kind of level of complete disconnection. Life around them has such different values to those of us that are in a more privileged position of being incredibly aware of the challenges and the options and the intellect to think it through. And I think that that can be quite divisive. And so I think understanding, it's not about finding a baseline, because I think that's very patronizing, but I think it's finding an understanding that everybody starts from where they are on the map, and not everyone's looking at the same destination, and not everybody has that same view. And so I think that understanding of where everybody stands at that time and meet them at they are is sort of like Keely was saying, it's like, what is that willingness to listen? Because, you know, you go to an airport and discuss anybody about what they're trying to get out of their holiday, for example, they will all be different. And you know, there will not be many that sit and talk about, well, I want to go and regenerate the place I'm going to. It will be a very different, very, very different take. So that's just something I would add.
Or if they did, they might not use those words.
Yeah, true.
Be thinking about things in their own way that actually has that outcome without realizing sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think vernacular absolutely comes into it.
I do agree with Josh and Kat in the fact that they are saying about the stakeholders. I think that's one of the key priorities. And probably I will say not only listen to them, but put them in the same room and let them discuss. Because sometimes they believe they're doing something nice. Or let's put a basic example. They are doing recycling, for instance. Like, it's not bad, but it's not enough. So it's like everybody's blindfolded, like holding one of the legs of the elephant and describing whatever they see when it's exactly the same animal. So whenever you put them together and realize like, oh, we're talking about the same thing, as Kat was saying, probably, or Keely was saying in a different language or different words, that everybody have their own vocabulary and terminology. And we don't realize that we are hoping to have the same objectives in some cases, but basically it's just knowing who are the stakeholders, what are their needs, what are their motivations, and how will they be willing to cooperate and find this engagement, finding this common sense that they will be.
And figuring out what problem we're trying to solve.
Yeah. Or the other way around, instead of just thinking about the problem, instead of just thinking about the problem, about the potential that they can do. I mean, because sometimes we think about the problem, we just ended up like, oh, I don't have money, I don't have the resources, I don't have the skills, I don't have anything. But if you pass to the other border, if I have all of these, what can I do? And that's when everything changes and there's no limits, just imagination.
Go ahead.
It's the irony of a problem-solving mindset. It creates problems.
Most of the time, yeah.
So Debbie, I'm curious. I have a question for you, I guess. Are you seeing patterns in these responses? What are you seeing in the responses that we're getting?
I'm hearing people think about what thriving is, and from multiple perspectives of people and place. And I'm hearing, I think I'm hearing us trying to develop ourselves so that we can come into alignment with what thriving looks like in our places. So there's something coming up for me in that as well, and everything that people have been talking about.
And the theme that was popping up for me was just what's required is coming into relationship, right? Cultivating and regenerating and expanding the notion of what we mean by coming into relationship with all of life.
Yeah.
Any other quick thoughts? We're gonna transition a little bit here in a moment.
I just had a small reflection
Yeah.
on the fact that quite often this discussion revolves around a crisis, or something that's already happened, and that it can be just as applicable to a situation that doesn't have a negative impact already.
Yeah.
And it should be, in order that they don't get there.
Right. Yeah, there is actually a premise in this work that we learn and understand best by applying the kind of thinking that we're going to be talking about to our life in general, right? And so there are times when we are in crisis and times when we're not, and right, it's that application to life, and we're going to speak to that in a little bit. So I want to share something that comes from Carol Sanford. And I'm just going to do this for a couple minutes, and then we're going to put you in another breakout. I wanted to point out that the naming of this series was really deliberate, in that it was stating a premise about what we believe regenerative is, or at least an element of it, significant element of it. So the name of the series, we call it Becoming Regenerative. So the premise embedded within that is that regenerative is more than the things that we do, right? It's something we become through our growing our experiences and understandings and capacities and capabilities to engage with living systems, through, and someone already mentioned this, through unlearning, right? Through really listening and trying to come into relationship. There are elements of this that is also about like just embracing uncertainty and not knowing, right? To that problem solving point, right? Our cultures usually, right, reward the knowing and don't reward the not. So they want the answers, not the questions, right? So just being comfortable in that uncertainty and not knowing is an element of it, and really trying to be conscious about how we're thinking. And so there's this premise embedded in the naming, and it's really a reflection of this idea from Carol. And of course, let me get the right slide up. So some of you I know are familiar with this and have seen it. Everybody see that?
Yeah.
So the idea here is that the power to affect change is upstream of what we do and the results and outcomes that produce, and the effects and affects that those outcomes have. It's actually upstream of what we think. Anyone know the difference between thinking and thoughting? So this is a notion that comes from David Bohm, a physicist who engaged in a lot of debates with Krishnamurti about the nature of consciousness and so forth.
Give it a stab.
What's that?
I said I'll give it a stab.
No, go for it, Daniel.
Thinking feels like a more proactive thoughting, where thoughts kind of maybe just come to you and you're like, oh, where'd that come from? Then you can think about that. So yeah. It feels like thoughts come from somewhat outside or from a place where you don't understand, where thinking is a bit more internal dialogue.
Right. There's an active element of thinking. And I think it's aligned with what David Bohm would say, right? Thoughting is repeating what others have said or regurgitating what you've said 100 times already, right? It doesn't require any new thinking to simply restate a position that you've held, right? And so we do that in this knee-jerk way, right? That it just kind of flows out of us because that's the first thing that pops into our head, right? And so that's the difference between thinking and thoughting. And then Carol would say this power to affect change is even upstream of what it is that we think about. It's upstream of, but requires us to recognize the conditioning that we've all been exposed to throughout our lives and the sources behind our thinking. What is it that's generating that thoughting? Where does that come from? And understanding and recognizing the worldview, the patterns, right, all the stuff that we've all lived through that have produced the thoughting primarily that we do. And then Carol would say, what we really need to be working on is how we think. And in many ways, that's how can we organize and raise the level of our thinking by observing and actively participating in how we think. So part of what we're going to be working on in this series is some suggestions on ways to potentially shift that thinking. Anything you'd like to add here, Debbie?
No, I was just thinking about as we're moving into the next breakout, we're going to be asking a couple of questions that relate to that graphic that you just saw about becoming aware of our own thinking and how that can manifest or lead to potential systems effects. So that notion that we're actually serving or we're trying to serve something greater than just ourselves. So that leads us into our next breakout, and we will be coming back again from the breakout and discussing it further. So I'm not going to talk too much more about this other than to hold that in mind, what Marcus was just talking about, thinking upstream from the systems effects we're trying to create and manifest or cultivate. And we're going to put you in breakouts of 3 people in each group, if we can manage that. And there's 3 questions that we're asking you to explore. And I'll put them in the chat as well. Let's see if we can. So the first is, what are the systems that you're seeking to transform? And how do you see the potential? I think Maria Anna talked about potential. How do you see the potential of your organization to affect that change that you're seeking?
Could be any group that you work with.
Yeah. And the third question is, why do you even care? Why do you care about this? So what are the systems that you're seeking to transform? How do you see the potential of your organization to affect the change that you're seeking? And why do you care? Any questions on that before we go into the breakout?
Want to put those in the chat? You want me to?
They're in the chat. Yeah, I dropped them in the chat. So
thank you.
Yeah. And we're giving how long for this? Oh, we're giving you 15 minutes for this.
15,
so a little more generous because it's a deeper discussion potentially. And that'll run us until 12:20.
Here you go. Whoop.
You go ahead.
Now I get it.
Okay, we're back.
Welcome back, everyone.
Ah, great. All right. Good, good. So we asked you to reflect on those 3 questions. And now what we're curious to hear from you is not necessarily what you talked about in response to those 3 questions, but to reflect upon the discussion you had and what you noticed in that discussion about the relationship between those questions. What did you notice about the relationship between the questions? What are the systems you're seeking to transform? How do you see the potential of your organization to affect the change you're seeking? And why do you care?
I feel like they're really interwoven. I've been in the real world for about 25 years. And right when I started, I was very compartmentalized. Like I used to think this is my career peoples and my ideas, and these are my friends and family. And I kept them very separate in my mind. But as I've grown wiser, perhaps, I don't know, I'm realizing that everything is connected. Everything is so interconnected. And so when I think about like, why do I care? That directly fuses up. And I actually answered the questions in reverse order, because I think that it is so personal what we bring to our, what we do and how we walk on this planet. So.
Yeah, they can be answered in either order, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did the other folks in your group answer the other way?
Yes.
So I'm curious, what did you observe any or notice any differences between you're going up and they're going down?
I think we all hit on everything. So I don't think there was any real big difference. I don't know. What do you guys think in my group?
I think first time we answered it from the top down, but then you said like you want to start with the down last question, and then I was thinking like, yeah, that makes more sense. So I was starting with the question 2. So yeah.
And I feel like we also seamlessly went between the 3 questions between the 3 of us. They're all very intertwined. I also thought it was interesting, like, why do you care usually is the first question in the pyramid.
Yes.
But starting with what other systems you're seeking to transform is a big question that is probably very difficult for a lot of people to even answer, because most people don't even know what a system is.
We had a lot of discussion around that as well. And I think we spent most of our time talking about what system, is it the big economic system, or is it tourism, or is it agriculture, or is it marketing? But then realizing that they're all part of one thing. And the reason that we were debating probably, and Rebecca and Vicky chime in, but the reason we were debating it so much was because we cared about all the things that we interacted with and how we were frustrated by systems, and perhaps having seen a lot of not real change, or people pretending to change, or obfuscation, particularly within things such as sort of, corporate and marketing, where people are sort of, there's a lot of voice rather than actually, and what does change actually mean? What does that look like within each of those sectors? It seems to be slightly different as to how it's appearing, when actually we're all looking for that much more authentic kind of from the core out kind of change. So yeah, then we realized that the reason we were having this big debate was because we just cared.
Yeah, you're probably here because you care, right?
Yeah. Sorry.
I was going to say, and I care because I've been personally affected, right? So I think that's what drives the caring.
I think one thing I noticed with our group is that we all had very different system examples. So different areas of life that we were talking about, everything from tourism to housing and well-being to work and communication. And for me, I have gone into regenerative, I'm new to it, so I've gone into it through sort of a, one specific area. And so the thing that was really striking for me and was very interesting was to hear that applied to these other areas of life, but also the common thread I heard, and not to oversimplify, was just wanting to do something that leads to the greater good for all. And to me, it was a very selfless discussion, even with all these different areas. It was all about the selflessness and doing good for the improving things for the greater good.
What's coming up for me is when we talk about systems is the scale that at which we're trying to affect change. The scale, what are the systems that we're working on, and trying to think about that in a way that is intentional and clear, so we have an understanding of what is realistically possible for us to be working on. I know I'm in the tourism sector too, and think about the tourism system, but actually what scale is it that's possible for us to affect change?
We're discussing as well in the tourism sector as well. And we were thinking that at the end, most of the time, the things that have more action and are easy to manage are the small actions that are happening in the ground. And then you start finding like these connections, and then they start getting the building little by little the strength that is needed to bring bigger groups, of course. And also the thing that we discussed was the importance of integrating the industry or the business, but trying to change that mindset, it's a bit tricky, especially when you think they're just approaching or getting to the wolf's cave, like everybody just trying to eat each other instead of just how to work together. But we still have this hope that eventually something will happen, and there's an alignment in trying to, as Karen was saying, just trying to find the benefit for everybody.
Feels like a segue, Marcus.
Sounds good. All right. So there's actually a structure behind the formation of these three questions. So one of the key aspects of the work that we do in this school is we engage with frameworks to help organize and raise the level of our thinking. So that was, Carol's premise about we need to work on how we're thinking. And that primarily comes from the need to really organize it and try to raise the level of our thinking, and recognizing that there are potentially different levels of thinking. And so there's a framework behind the formation of those three questions, which I'm going to share with you. It is called 3 lines of work. So at the first line, and you can scale this many different ways, but the questions that we generated were based on the framing that I'm going to offer here. So what we're suggesting here is the first line is you. It's the work that you're doing on yourself right? That's the why do you care? The second level is at the level of groups that we work with. So this, may be a company or a nonprofit or a book club or your family, or right, whatever groups that you work with. We generally refer to those as like second line communities in the context of this framework. And then those groups usually have some sort of purpose where they're trying to have an effect upon something in the world, right? So that's that question about the systems you're seeking to transform. And so the questions were structured in a way that focused on each of these 3 levels kind of independently, right? They were focused on the things in this framework, the 1, 2, 3 things in the framework. But it's important to understand the way that this framework works is it's not just, and the way all of the frameworks actually work, and we're going to be unpacking that as we go through this series. It's as much about the relationship between the elements in the framework as it is about the elements themselves, right? So this is the framework is called 3 lines of work. And so there's work that happens between in the relationship between the work you're doing on yourself and the work groups are doing out in the world. And then there's a relationship between the work that groups are doing out in the world and the effect they wish to see. So we refer to that effect as the third line. So what's that third line that your groups are trying to work on? And it's also important to note that it works the other way as well, right? So the transformation that you're trying to seek, and as you're trying to develop that in a way that evolves and changes all the time, right? That needs to feed back and potentially have an effect on your organization, and how that organization develops, right, can have an effect on you as well. So the important thing to note here is it's called 3 lines of work because there's work at each one of these levels, right? And so we want to put you in a breakout to kind of explore the nature of that work. Anybody have any questions or comments about that? That all make sense? So as you're setting up the breakouts this time, right, Debbie? So
Yep.
as you're working on this next set of questions that we're going to ask you and put you in a breakout to work on, what I would invite you to do is practice what we call self-observing, and observe how you're thinking about this in the context that I just introduced and in the context of the questions I'm about to ask you, versus how you were thinking about it in the previous breakout. So try and practice a little self-observing about how is my thinking shifting when thinking about it through the lens that we offered the first time versus the lens that we're offering this time. And so this exercise is really about the nature of that relational work between the lines of this framework. So the questions are in the chat. What is the nature of the relationship between the lines? What capacities and capabilities are required of you and your organization to be more effective at addressing the change you seek at the third line? So really what's the nature of the work that needs to happen between the lines is the focus here. Any questions? Comments? Accusations? All right.
All right.
What did we say, Debbie? 10 minutes, right?
Yeah. All right, here we go. I'll let you push pause, Mark.
Welcome back, everyone. All right. So you can kind of anticipate where we might be going with this, right? Is when you come out of these, we're not asking you what's the content of what you talked about. We're asking you to reflect on that, right? So in this case, this is related to that invitation I offered to practice kind of some self-observing during this process. So what did you notice about the difference in your thinking and how you were engaging the first exercise where we, right, had the 3 questions versus this exercise? What shifted? What differences did you notice in your own thinking, or even in your interactions with each other?
I think I noticed that the first exercise, the questions were interconnected, but we were able to answer these one by one. And now it was just everything flowing together. So we tried to talk about the questions, but we didn't really say we talk about question 1 now and 2 then, and yeah.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that one of the differences is the initial, and don't let me put words in your mouth, tell me if this is right, that the initial set of questions felt a little more, even though they're all interrelated, a little more fragmented than the last one, and the last one felt like you were addressing more of a whole. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think the first set of questions you talk about more, and you already know what to say. And the second exercise, we kind of figured it out together, I think.
Oh, nice.
I certainly felt in the last discussion, and I've felt this in all the groups, particularly for me, I've started to feel heard and seen because I connected instantly with sort of what we were all discussing and found a relationality and a sort of a common thought that we're all sitting with that sort of wasn't necessarily sort of anchored around a question, but around a point where we're all at. I'm not saying that incredibly well, but Kelly and Karen, I think we've found sort of a point of shared understanding or shared frustration around something.
Sometimes shared frustration and can be very generative. Yes.
In a way, I think we kind of worked our way from the inner circle to the outer circle, going from the first set of questions to the last set, because the first set of questions was really, they were sort of concrete, right? Let's define what we're talking about. And it was sort of, sort of the anchor point. And then the last set of questions was really talking about values and sort of sense of purpose and purpose-driven work. At least that's what came out of our discussion.
Great. How about some others? What did you notice about the difference?
I'll say I was in with Kat and Kelly, and it's like I don't think I even know, like we kind of maybe know what systems we're working on. Like we didn't talk about what we do, what arenas we're working in, but like we found this like such connection around these larger meta patterns that are all that are super alive in our lives, and we're, that moment of like when you feel something so strongly alive in your life and you're like, how do I work with this? And then you find other people who are like, me too. That's the thing. Like we literally were like, you're my people.
Wonderful.
I feel like for me, these two exercises, when you compare them, the process was about, the first one feels like the questions were framed to help us see when we're thoughting, because we're drawing information we've already regurgitated before. We've already had to formalize an elevator pitch response to those questions in some way. So it was easier to draw from memory. Whereas this exercise was more sparking creativity in terms of really having to think through how do I go about unpacking this and putting this back together again in a way that makes sense to me. So it was focused more around the thinking side of things. If we're comparing the two approaches.
No, that's great. I can tell you, when Debbie and I were working on this, I don't believe we were holding that consciously. So it's interesting that it came up that way. Yeah. Thanks. How about others?
Well, it's your mother, and of course I'm a layperson, and for some reason my picture didn't come up. But I want everybody to know how proud I am of what my son has been doing, and that I wanted to understand where you're coming from. So it's been an education for me, son. And again, it starts with each individual, how you see the world, how you want to affect it. Because I'm a great grandmother. What are we leaving this world to our children and our great grandchildren? And that's why my son's out there in his own way trying to make change. And I'm so proud of him. Sorry about that.
Everybody needs their mom to show up at their events. Yeah, just
That's right.
I've, in all honesty, you've just given me the best idea, because my mother is a bit clueless about what I do. She probably doesn't value and respect it, and I'm going to invite her to one of my meetings now.
Please, because we
so
do
thank
need,
you for coming, Mum.
but we do need to know. we do need to be grateful of what you're doing and be proud of you.
Thank you.
That's so beautiful.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody care to add on to or top that or?
Sorry, son.
That's okay. So, any other reflections? Any other thoughts coming up for folks?
Can I reflect on the fact that your mum just chimed in so beautifully? Because I think one of the discussions we were having is all around how we feel about work and being individual workers. And as someone who's trying to go through career change, explaining it to the generation above, your parents, and is so hard. And sometimes I just give up trying to explain why I'm trying to be different or what I do. And so can I just say I just love the fact that there's that sharing and that openness to understand. And yeah, maybe one day I'll get there with mine, but I don't know.
We're there.
What came up for me in the discussion, and this is a framework I've been working with for 5 years and still discovering new things, is what capabilities I have to grow in my organization for it to affect. A lot of it is I know what I need. I think I know what I need for myself, and these types of experiences today are part of that growth required. But to think about what my organization needs and what education to do that has had a relationship I hadn't really thought as much about, as well as how I can present it to the outside, how the organization can present itself to the outside community. So it's considered something positive and not something radical or irrelevant to what other people's lives might be experiencing right now.
Yeah, that really so that brings in, and we'll probably get to this in some future sessions, this kind of nodal notion of role, right? What's the role that I can play in that relationship between myself and those organizations? Thanks, Josh. All right. Back to Debbie.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. And thanks, Marcus's mum. That was just beautiful. Appreciated that. Really, really magical. So we started out the session asking you what regenerative meant to you. So what we'd like you to think about and share now as a way of closing, what has shifted in your thinking about what it means to be regenerative? What has shifted through the session in your thinking about what it means to be regenerative?
Even what were you thinking coming into this session about what it means to be regenerative?
No knowledge and now understanding.
Thank you.
There's a future session too, the difference between knowledge and understanding, but we'll work on that in the future.
There's always a future session.
Yes.
I think for me is that it doesn't just apply to tourism. And that sounds like a very sort of elementary thing to say, but for someone who's new to the term and how it's applied, for me, that was really the big takeaway. It's not just tourism.
Thanks, Karen.
For me, I think, although I've always been very committed, having been at World Travel Market last week and the very mainstream mass market impacts there, be it demonstrated in the stands, be it the sales values of aviation, yada yada. I probably came today a little bit questioning, thinking, am I doing the right approach? And we go through this ourselves, right, up and down all the time. And so for me, it's been a good reaffirmation of sticking with my values, and that's what I'm comfortable with. That's what I want to do. That's the change I want to affect, and just a good reminder that the WTMs of this world are the industry that was in its dying throes, hopefully, eventually. Yeah. And all the challenges and all the sticking points right now between the big organizations and the big brands and trying to come into this space and not doing it well, and you know, personal conflict about which way do I handle this. It's just, yeah, stick back to the values.
Nice. Thanks, Vicky.
I have to say it's very uplifting being in this type of forums. I have to thank you all. Sometimes you feel that you're against the waves, just trying to reach the other side, and there's no way that you can handle, but just talking to you guys is always kind of reconforting and saying that it's possible. You just have to be patient on it and just keep going on it.
I
And also,
can really agree with
practice
that.
more.
Yeah, I can really agree with that, because I kind of needed a reminder, like, what am I working towards? What I'm doing all this work for. So yeah, so that for me it's like I worked like 9 hours before this, so I'm pretty tired. But I don't know, it was good to be here.
What's sticking for me in terms of regenerative is really the relational piece. It's not individuated. That's what I keep coming back to. It's just this relational aspect.
And
Yeah,
for
it was
me, to add on to that, it's like saying the words, like doing the work in relation and saying the words. Like, Marcus, I appreciated you starting today by saying, no, we're not just going to come and be sponges, because as you know me, the last few years, that's my MO. I'm a good sponge. I'm a sponge, right? But being invited into conversation is really beautiful. So thank you.
Well, we've all been conditioned to be sponges, right? That's how we get rewarded all through our childhood and school, and right in the workplace too. Right? So thanks for
Me
that.
as well, I think these kind of environments, which are incredibly hard to find and incredibly precious, when I'm away from this, I find it hard to think and act in and have hope in a regenerative sense. But when you're in spaces like this, you're constantly connecting, and it's the connections that start to make you feel as if you are regenerating in some way, because your thinking is within these sessions bubbling and changing. And so I suppose it's spaces where you can connect as the kind of the start point. So thank you, because I think without these, we don't start to meet like-minded people or even start to be able to answer questions or think about questions. So I think this is sort of in itself, for me, the sort of the ground that I need in order to have time to be regenerative, as opposed to the rest of the world where you're kind of just thinking how you can be it.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Nice. In our last minute, any other final reflections?
I'll say I got another wonderful dose of the fact that this is such growth edge work, because I think the nature of regenerating is about that which doesn't isn't yet in the world. And
right.
I'm always like, what's trying to emerge, and how do I serve that in a really beautiful way that brings more well-being through the whole system? And if that's never existed in that particular form before, of course it's going to be really challenging. And I know I can't see the whole thing from my tiny perspective. And I feel like when we come together, we get to see more with more eyes, ears and hands, what's alive in the world. So thank you to everyone for that.
Yeah, thank you all for showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. Friends in the work, so important.
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is more to come. This is going to be a monthly series. So please come back again, and hopefully this feels like it was nourishing. And as you reflect more on this, we invite you to in the circle space, in our space, our Becoming Regenerative space, there is a discussion space. So go into the discussion place if you feel called to share more of your reflections, if there's anything else that's moving in you. If you didn't have a chance today or you would like to at any point, this is the space that is ours. It's yours. It's all of ours collectively. So please don't hesitate to jump in and share any of your thinking or reflections in response to this.
All right. And next month, Karen Olson and I will be offering a session focused on paradigm shifting and worldviews.
No.
So I hope you can join us.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mom.
So much.
Good trouble, everybody. Good trouble.
Good trouble. That's right.
Be well.
No.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
That's lovely. Thank you. And my apologies for getting here late. My mechanic had an unexpected extra thing and I got done late and blah, blah, blah. So my apologies, but
Glad you could make it.
lovely. Thank you.